Hi, this is the Maverick artist Vic Hugo reporting modern art gonzo journalism for the modern art music movement. It is June 28th, 2025, reporting from the former Soviet Union, Republic of Georgia, near the border with Russia, Turkey, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. My job is not to be politically correct. It is to witness, observe, analyze, and document the beautiful chaos that surrounds us all so that future generations can understand how we got to this moment in time where I am blessed to be joined by Jeffrey Phillips of VGT Live Podcast. And he is a vegetarian podcaster. And we will ask him what exactly that means. Welcome to the show, Jeffrey Phillips. Thanks for sharing time and wisdom with my audience.
Thank you, sir. It's an honor.
Vegetarian podcaster, does that mean that I can take pleasure as a meat eater in eating steak while listening to your show and downing a couple of good beers?
Of course, if you're always, if you have a open mind and you're willing to learn and you're not closed off to new stuff, you're absolutely able to do that.
So, my first experience with vegans was a friend of mine who is the lead singer of a band called Day Soul that I grew up with. I was with him in grade school. I went to a Catholic school in Queens Village, New York, Incarnation School. And from first through eighth grade, I was friends with him. I would consider him a close friend. Later on in life, somehow we reunited, and turns out he found out that I was the founder of the modern art music movement, the fusion of art, music, film, fashion, literature, and education, fostering peace, love, and compassionate wealth worldwide. And he just so happened to be the lead singer of a pretty popular band that was touring around the United States. So he asked if I would want to join him on tour. I have synesthesia. I hear wavelengths and frequencies and color. And so I interpret the energy of the audience, the energy of the band, and the energy of the venue and coalesce it on canvas to create a Rorschach interpretation of the event. And what was amazing was as we were touring through New Hampshire and Massachusetts and other parts of the beautiful United States of Israel, I ended up going back home with him. And it was so funny because when we were on tour, we were on the tour bus, and the groupies and the fans were coming onto the tour bus and asking us to autograph their chests and stuff like that. So it was like a totally surreal experience. And then when we got to his house, because he wanted to get home before his son went to school for the first day, and he wanted to be there with him to be the father that put him on the school bus. And it was amazing because we drove through the night and we just so happened to get there 10 minutes before the school bus showed up. And the whole rock and roll lifestyle disappeared because as soon as we walked in the door, his wife kissed him and she said, "Take out the garbage." And he was like dressed in the outfit that he had on stage, and we were dressed like, like in a rock and roll garb. And then like reality sunk in, he was no longer the rock star. He was the husband and father, and it was time to take out the garbage and take his kid to the school bus, where it was really weird because we're standing there at the school bus surrounded by these, I don't know, I call them MILFs. I'm not married, I have no children, so I call them MILFs. But that was so surreal, man. It was like a night and day. Anyway, it turns out he was a vegan. So
Mhm.
when finally the kid went to school and the wife went to work, he's like, "Hey man, let's have some breakfast." So he opens up the freezer and there's vegan bacon and vegan this and vegan that. I'm like, dude, what are you talking? Don't lie to me. This isn't meat. This isn't bacon, man. So what's that all about? What's vegan bacon and what's vegan burgers? Come on, man. Let's get real. That's like sex without the orgasm.
So when I was lucky enough to be raised by a pretty conscious mother back in the day. She was a hippie and um, had me born at home, no drugs, no nothing like that. And she raised me by this doctor's protocol named Dr. McDougall, who actually unfortunately passed away last year. Um, and so I was raised vegetarian, roughly vegetarian. We would occasionally partake in like it was called back in the day a Rocky Range chicken, which was an organic chicken before organic was very popular. They had these free range chickens. I remember not liking them very much because they were kind of earthy. They were like more, they were grazed, and stuff like that. So anyway, mostly vegetarian growing up. And then in the mid 90s, there was a punk rock movement called straight edge that happened. It was connected to some music called hardcore punk rock. And I fell hook, line, and sinker into that scene. And that scene was very politically conscious, it was a very health oriented scene. But then you go, it was like this kind of goody two shoes sounding thing. But then you go to one of our concerts, and it's one of the most aggressive things you've ever seen. It was a bunch of, teenage boys that maybe had some mommy issues, that were angry at the world for getting spanked too much and not hugged enough growing up. And so there was a lot of moshing and heavy music, but it was connected to this very positive movement, which eventually evolved into the vegan straight edge movement. None of the people that were straight edge would drink alcohol, do drugs, anything like that, partake in promiscuous behavior. It was a very positive thing. So veganism became a part of the straight edge movement. And I was doing a lot of animal rights. And so obviously I was vegetarian growing up. So that scene was very appealing to me. So up until I moved to Los Angeles, I'm from California, but I'd lived in Northern California. I moved to Los Angeles, and I got caught up in being a musician and a model and a TV actor, and started partying. I was in a pretty big band that was on a major label and was given $500,000. Basically was somewhat of a broke, starving artist, and then given a bunch of money. So eventually my morals kind of left the equation because I was partying, doing all the excess, the musician life. And unfortunately started just eating meat, and I got into the whole carnivore diet there, the paleo diet thing of just eating massive amounts of meat. I became an activist after I left Hollywood. The band thing was like kind of cool, but it wasn't really, in my opinion, doing anything good for the greater good of the world. I was always an activist growing up. And so luckily I left the Hollywood scene ahead. I didn't have I didn't end up dead. I didn't end up, strung out on the street. Luckily, I was able to pull myself together, and that's when I got back into activism. Probably around 2008, I found Ron Paul, and he really motivated me into becoming a libertarian. Which the vegan straight edge movement was already very political, anti-political, and so I fit right in with the whole libertarian anarchist scene. And I started doing a lot of work. A lot of grassroots work for Ron Paul. In 2012, we were hosting lots of libertarian meetups in Hollywood, which was super fun. So I was still a carnist during this time. I was still eating meat. And I watched a video by a buddy of mine who was vegan, and he made all the connections with the government subsidies propping up the meat and dairy industry, the moral reasoning behind, enslaving billions and billions of animals, killing billions of animals a day unnecessarily. um, for food, and kind of made all these connections, which were like, oh shit, like the non-aggression principle. I talk about the non-aggression principle all the time, pertaining to humans, but it obviously, is relevant towards animals too. You can't preach all day about being this peaceful person who's anti-slavery, but then enslave animals because of a taste you like. So I had a friend be like, the non-aggression principle definitely is relevant to animals, dude. You kind of seem like a hypocrite. And I was like, shit. And then I'd seen my buddy's video about the subsidies and everything. And basically, if the government didn't subsidize meat and dairy, the price of meat and dairy would be through the roof, and most people would be vegetarian, vegan, probably by default, just because they wouldn't be willing to spend all the money for a pound of beef, $200. Because I had when my daughter was born, I bought some goats. I bought 2 goats because I was going to make her goat milk formula, and I was blown away by how much it cost to keep those goats alive, fed, healthy, the land, the water, the maintenance, the time and attention, the veterinary cost. I was like, how is this possible? So once I saw that the government is subsidizing that industry so much that it's completely propping it up, it's paying for 80% of the meat that you eat on your plate. The government's paid for that. And if they weren't around, you likely wouldn't be able to afford it. So once I learned all that stuff, I was like, oh man, I guess I'm vegan now, because I couldn't ignore what was put in front of me. I just felt like a hypocrite. And and then yeah, so the more I've learned over the years, I believe vegetarianism is a good way of lowering the amount of harm you do to the world, because in a way, we're all freedom activists, we're all peace activists, we're trying to save humanity, but we also, could save a lot of animals and change how we deal with animals, because it psychologically, it does screw with us. Leo Tolstoy said, as long as there are slaughterhouses, there will be battlefields. And it's true. When we feel, it shows a lack of morality and a lack of knowledge of karma. There's a karmic debt to eating meat and dairy, unfortunately, and most people don't even think about it, because we've been brainwashed by marketers our whole life to think that this is our natural diet. So to answer your question, in 20 minutes. That's about it.
Wow, Jeffrey, there's a lot to break down there, and you're
Yeah.
absolutely right. The hypocrisy of it all, and also the stereotypes. So first, I want to ask you, can you tell us the name of the band that you were with? Because it's a small world.
I was in a pretty goofy band called Hollywood Undead back in the day. We were very popular on a social media site called MySpace. We were one of the biggest bands on MySpace, despite the fact that we had never played a show. We were kind of the first band to get big on the internet when the internet came out, and we went from using CDs to MP3s. We were kind of like the first band to get 10,000 followers online without ever playing a show before, just because of our website, our MySpace page and how it was set up, was a big deal for, like, the record industry didn't know what they were gonna, didn't know how it was gonna work with the internet, and all the record industries were thinking that they were going to go out of business, and so it was a pretty crazy time. The guy who ran MySpace, Tom, who's everyone's friend if you're on MySpace,
Yeah.
we ended up being buddies, and we did a campaign of interviews when I what was what was Apple's music? iTunes. When iTunes came out, and MySpace Music came out at the same time, and we went around and did all the big newspapers talking about the story of my band that got famous off of a website, which had never happened before. Now, obviously, that's the norm, but at that time, it had never happened before. It was a pretty
Boy,
interesting experience.
you and I are aging ourselves because most people of this generation have no idea that MySpace was before Facebook or Instagram, and that was the social media platform. I think my page is still up on MySpace, and I was also, as an artist, quite, I don't know, popular on that, whatever popular means. But what was the name of your band again? I'm sorry, Hollywood.
Hollywood Undead.
And
We
what kind of
like
music
it
did
was
you play?
like rap, rock, metal. We like wore masks. It was a total joke in the beginning. And that's kind of what's the funniest part about the story. We were just kind of messing around and made a MySpace page, and it just blew up. Like people just loved it, and they're still around. They're still touring and selling out places. We made quite an impression back then. It was a very interesting time, very fun time. MySpace was like looking at MySpace now, that was the Wild West back then. We were allowed to do anything on MySpace. No one
Yeah.
got banned, no one got censored. There was no psychological operations happening to us, at least as far as I know. I kind of want to interview Tom again these days and ask him, and ask him about that stuff and if he was ever talked to by the CIA or anything like that.
I'd
Because
love to
I'd
be
imagine he was.
I'd love to be part of that if you don't mind including me in that interview with Tom, because I went to the Naval Academy and I was being groomed to be part of naval intelligence with the PSYOPs. So I'm very familiar with
Ooh,
right now, and I think it'd be interesting for you, myself, and Tom to discuss that. So if you make that happen, please include me on that show. I'd love to be a part of it. A
yeah,
lot of people of this generation don't understand the freedom that we had on MySpace. I remember as an artist that was just beginning my career, wow, that gave me such a freedom that I just don't have right now. I'm banned from Facebook. I'm banned from Instagram. I'm banned from YouTube. I'm banned from LinkedIn. I'm banned from Venmo. I'm banned from X. I mean, it's like
damn,
there's more places I'm banned from than
yeah,
I'm actually on. I guess, on the internet ghetto. But what's fascinating about that is that we are circumventing the censorship because they can't censor word of mouth. And so people are sharing the website, victorhugocollection.com, and they're actually downloading the videos and then they're sharing them on their own platforms, which is fantastic because we are getting through this censorship. I also want to discuss the stereotypes that you brought up there because most people, when they think of punk rock, they don't think of vegans, but vegan is a counterculture thing for the very reasons that you're saying, and you're absolutely right. It reminds me of my experience when I was living with an Indian family in Trinidad, Tobago, and we were without electric. Quite literally, the water that we had to drink and bathe with was the water that came from the sky. They had the big container that was able to take the water. So people didn't really bathe that much because it was more important to have drinking water than to bathe, and then also eating with your hands. So it was very primitive for me. I like to put myself in those situations. I'm a germ phobe, so it was really quite extraordinary because I had to eat soup with my hands. I don't know if you've ever done
wow,
that,
no,
but
not soup.
the food was served on like leaves. You go out,
Yeah,
you get the leaves, and then they pour soup onto the leaves, and then you just drink the soup with your hands. It was like, whoa. Anyway, it was an honor for me to be with this family. They housed me for over a month because they wanted me to film and photograph the wedding ceremony, which an Indian wedding ceremony goes about 28 days. And so they said, "Hey, listen, we're gonna sacrifice one of these goose that we have, or geese. I don't know what they call it in singular. Actually, there were two. So they wanted me to chop off the head and then to take the feathers off and all that stuff. And holy cow, like you said, it's one thing to actually buy it at the store when it's already cleaned and processed and put in plastic and you just take it home. And it's another thing to actually grab that thing, snap its neck,
Yeah.
cut it, pluck it. It's just a horrific experience. So I was like, wow, I think I may be
Fun.
vegan after this, because I mean,
Yeah.
really, if you've got to do that. And then if you see the halal, how they
Halal's awful.
torture the animals to get the maximum. And then when I was
Flip them
living in,
upside down and cut their
yeah.
throats and they just bleed out.
And then in China, when I was living in China, what they do to the dogs, how they torture the dogs and skin them alive to get the maximum flavor. I'm like, oh my God. So yeah, I totally get the karma. I also had a woman who was psychic, and she said, Victor, you eat too much meat, and that's not good for your like karma. She's like, you need
Yep.
to cut down on the meat. So wow, it's
Well,
a
the
tough
the
thing.
karma that we induce from eating meat and dairy is what eventually kills us from eating meat and dairy. People don't really look at it like that, but it's definitely, the health problems that come along are definitely the compounded karma that is induced. But yeah, so going back to MySpace, the coolest thing about MySpace is that they allowed us to do HTML to our pages. You could make your page into a complete art piece with music.
Yeah.
And Facebook, they're like, nah, sorry, you have to stick with this minimalist, like, that architecture that came out in the 80s, the Russian stuff, huh? Brutalism, like these brutalist looking websites. But yeah, I lived in Central America for a while, and I was unfortunately, the USA isn't like, we're pretty nice to our animals here compared to some countries, and it was pretty sad to see how animals are treated in other countries. But yeah, the vegan straight edge thing. So in like 89 is when the hardcore scene started, and there was a band called Shelter, no, 108, that was it was Krishna core. It was
Cool.
called hardcore, but it was Krishnas. And these Krishnas were vegan. And another band called Earth Crisis sprouted from this scene. Earth Crisis is the main reason why veganism is probably known in the West, because of this hardcore band that was vegan straight edge, and that kind of brought the word veganism to the underground, not to the mainstream, but to the underground. And that was, I used to, and the Krishnas, we'd always see, like, I grew up in Santa Cruz, and there was always this Krishna guy that would be selling Bhagavad Gitas and Tulsi bead necklaces, and we'd sit down and talk to him, and like, he was a fan of Shelter and 108, and there was an actual scene of heavy punk rock that was inspired by Krishna, and that's where the vegan straight edge movement started from. And yeah, it is very strange and kind of to see a bunch of heavy metal, kind of looking punk rock kids, that are actually like really principled and health conscious and so spiritual, and like, it was a very strange thing that happened. And that whole hardcore scene is as now being popularized in the mainstream, as like a throwback, like when in the 90s, or in the 2000s, we were like going to clubs in LA that were 80s, but these guys were, where was I going with that? That was really weird. I just brain farted real quick. But yeah, so um yeah, so it was a very strange thing. And oh yeah, so now it's very popular. Now there are hardcore bands on Taco Bell commercials, and it's like, it's very strange for me because I grew up in this scene in the 90s, and it was very small, and our music, like a band would come through town, and 50 kids would show up, and that's it, because there are only so many vegan straight edge kids around, people that are into that kind of thing, into that kind of movement, especially in the 90s. It was very, the 90s were strange. Um, but but it was a lot of fun, and now, and seeing that people are into hardcore now, and hardcore's always had a very positive message, and to see, I'm like not even mad. Normally I'd be like, look at all these dorks that are all only getting into this now, but it's like it's such a positive movement that I'm super happy that it's big right now. There's a band called Turnstile that's huge on MTV. I mean, not MTV, but in Taco Bell commercials and stuff, and they're touring. They sell out, thousands of kids going crazy. It's really cool to see bands like that are putting a positive message out. Um, I'm not sure if they're vegan straight edge, but they're still keeping the positive hardcore thing going. But it's pretty cool times.
Hey, speaking of pretty cool times, I'm going to share screen with you. I don't know if you're familiar with this band. Tell me if you can see my screen. I just got turned on to these guys. They're a German band. They were around
German
in the late
bands are fun.
70s. The name is Can. The drummer is just unbelievable. And this is before loops. I'm going to play this for you. Check this out. Well, I
Oh,
guess
I can hear it.
I would play it for you if it had a volume, but it doesn't have it. Anyway, if you get a chance,
Uh,
check them out. They're called
Man,
Can, and it's called Vitamin C. Holy cow, that stuff is pretty intense, and I can't believe that I've just learned about it now. There's so much good stuff out there.
there's a lot of good music in the world.
Hey, where did you live in Central America?
Nicaragua.
Oh, really? Wow.
Very cool
What?
place. I recommend everyone visit there. It's very authentic still for Central America. It's right next door to Costa Rica, but it's still because of the Iran-Contra affair and the stuff that happened in the 80s with Nicaragua. The word has been stigmatized, so not many gringos go there. When I first moved there, my friends were like, "Man, is ISIS there?" Like, because it's just the word Nicaragua has been stigmatized, but it's one of the few authentic places still that's very cheap and very beautiful. The people are very nice. They have their own weird flavor of socialism that's kind of working, where they just tax the shit out of gringos that go there, and it kind of supports the country. I mean, it's obviously, I'm not, it's not a good system at all. It's one of the most impoverished places in the world. Um, but yeah, it was interesting living there for a while. I definitely recommend everyone living someplace impoverished once in their lives, definitely, and like living in the barrio with everyone, like not like going there and getting a renting a condo on the beach.
I lived in Costa Rica for a while and I was going to go to Nicaragua, but I was told that it was not safe and that it was just smarter for me not to go. I also was in the Dominican Republic and I actually drove into Haiti because I wanted to see what Haiti was like. And
Wow,
when I got there, the customs, the people that were at the border looked at me and they were like, wait a minute, you're a white guy, you're by yourself, you're in this
crazy.
car, you're gonna drive through Haiti. They were like, we're not gonna tell you what to do, man, but you're probably not gonna make it out alive. So when the
Yeah,
customs guys in Haiti told me that, I just drove into Haiti, stepped on the ground so I could say that I was in Haiti, and then I turned around and got back into the Dominican Republic. Yeah, there's just certain places in the world that it's just too dangerous to go to.
yeah. San Juan del Sur, Nicaragua, while I was there, was voted the safest place for women to travel um, in Central America or in Latin America. So they've done a lot to welcome gringos. They have like gringo police that will like just do anything for you. It was pretty cool living there, paying cops to go run errands for me and stuff. But it was kind of funny. Um, But yeah, it's a very safe place now. They have their problems. After I left, they kind of had a little mini. They had some civil issues with their president. Now is one of the guys that was from the Contra Wars in the 80s. He was one of the revolutionaries, but of course, he was cool back then, but he's corrupt now. And it was there's problems everywhere, but Nicaragua is very cool. You can hop over the border from Costa Rica and spend a month in Nicaragua off of your visa. You just have to hop back over and go back. But it's a very nice place. I had a great time there. I had no problems. I heard all the stories of getting mugged and everything, but I'm a 6'1" tattooed gringo when I carried around a machete with me, so you know, so I'm not surprised I didn't get mugged. Um, but yeah, Central America is a beautiful place.
And so you were living in California. I remember I was living there in Beverly Hills. I lived across from the MCI WorldCom. I don't know if you're right up the street from where they filmed Beverly Hills Cop at the
Yeah,
police station there. The one thing I
yeah.
remember, I was there because I was trying to get my movie Crackhead Jesus the movie financed, and so I was meeting with the guys from South Park at
Oh, that's cool.
yeah. Well, I figured they'd
Those
be
guys
into
are rad.
called Crackhead Jesus the movie. Anyway, I ended up meeting Bill Maher and Andrew Dice Clay and a bunch of other people,
Oh
which is
wow,
really no big deal because, as you know, when you're living in Hollywood and in Los Angeles, I mean, you walk outside the door and you
meet
would
people.
see
Yeah.
he's there. So I'm sitting there having pizza with Andrew Dice Clay, talking to him about Crackhead Jesus, and they all said it was a great idea. But the thing that I'm noticing about Hollywood is it's you really got to know somebody. If you, it's
Oh
never
yeah.
you don't
Or you know,
know.
you have to be in someone's family, really.
Yeah,
Like it's
yeah,
not even like you got to know people. You got to be born into it.
yeah. That's what I was noticing because they were all like, "Oh, we love your idea," but it's nepotism there.
Well, and
So
everyone's full of shit too. They'll just blow smoke up your ass even if they don't like your project,
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
let's hang
But
out sometime. Is California is the place where, oh yeah, let's hang out sometime, but you never end up hanging out. I've noticed when I go to other states, when people say let's hang out, they actually want to hang out. It's not like in Hollywood where it's just like people are just full of shit here.
yeah, it's a really weird place, California. And you said you grew up there and
Yeah,
you were
southern and northern California, so I got like the whole experience.
did you ever get into the whole, I mean, there's a lot of occult stuff that goes on there.
I'm actually only learning about that stuff late in life. The
Really?
last couple years, I've gotten into the occult, but I was pretty closed off to that stuff. Anything spiritual, um, I was really not ready for it. And so, yeah, now, obviously, and now knowing, being through the movie industry, being through the music industry, being through, the fashion industry, like I've seen the worst of all of it, basically. And it's pretty shocking how much control there is going on in Hollywood. And I was wanting to ask you, there's always been something like I've always told people, oh yeah, like the CIA, kind of started the modern art or the fine art movement in order to kind of like take meaning out of art, to kind of dumb it down. And I was wondering, is that true? Because it's something I know I was told that once by someone, or I read it somewhere, and I was like, holy shit. And it was just something I've always repeated. So I was thinking you probably know more about that than anyone.
It's totally true. And I've been protected from that. I believe in a creator. I'm a spiritual person. I believe that there is some sort of an angel or God is watching over me because when I was at the Naval Academy, what they do is they siphon everybody out. So in order to get in there, you had to be physically fit. You had to get high like grades in school. You had to be at least an A to get in there. You had to get nominated from either a congressman or a senator, vice president, or president. and each one could only give out two. So it was very select to get in there. Once you got in there, then they started another weeding out process to see if you had the capacity to make it through the physical. So they had this thing called Hell Week, where they made it so that for one full week you were sleep deprived. They would
Yeah.
allow you to get to 14 minutes and 30 seconds of sleep just before you got to the 15-minute mark where you were able to get REM, which actually allows you to rejuvenate. I
Sleep.
mean,
Yeah.
sleep is what gives us the fuel that we need to survive as human beings. And then some guy would come in with like a metal can and a baton, and he would just wrap it around so it sounded like gunshots, like machine gun shots. I get it. They had to do that because if you're in the jungle in Vietnam or in Nicaragua or wherever, you really can't fall asleep because people are trying to kill you, you know?
Yeah.
So you got to be on guard at all time. Anyway, what was amazing was, and I never knew this, you don't know this until you actually go through it. I found out that the human body is so amazing, and the mind is too. I actually learned how to sleep while standing up with my eyes open. I couldn't believe it.
I've seen. Yeah,
But
I've
you
heard about
become
that.
so like desperate for sleep that you actually go into like a zombie catatonic state, and I couldn't believe it. Like you're able to stand up because we had to stand at like in guard or in formation or
Yeah. On your watch.
but your body makes you
Yeah.
like you're like my brain has to shut down. So my brain shut down and was rejuvenating itself. It's an amazing process. Anyway, all I know is that's when most people break. That's
Yeah.
when they take you and they just like and I was with guys who were had scholarships for the football team because Army Navy is very big. So I would have these giants, these gorillas would come into my room and they were like crying. They're like, "Oh my God, I gotta get out of here. How are you making it through this?" And the thing that got me through was my sense of humor. I was able to find, and I still do that. A lot of people get turned off by my show because I have a dark sense of humor. The thing is, though, we're in dark times. And when you're in dark times, uh, there's a movie, Monty Python, and these guys are being tortured and they're being like held up and they're in like the castle and they're being tortured. But even that scene when they're all on the cross and they're like, always look on the bright side of life. You got to do that, man. Because I mean, life is tough. And if
My
you
dad
can't,
made me watch all those movies growing up. But the producer, what's the producer's babe of Monty Python?
Terry Gilliam,
Terry Gilliam's fuck genius.
yeah.
His stuff, his movies are. We just watched all his movies like a month ago, and we were like, "Whoa! I didn't know that was the guy from Monty Python. Like, he's made some cool stuff."
Yeah, yeah,
And
he's
he's an
unbelievable.
occult guy. He's like an occult guy. Like,
Well, it's interesting about the occult too, because Curtis Griffin is teaching me that the occult is more like knowledge. It's not
yeah,
necessarily having to do with the devil or Satan. It's the knowledge that they keep from us because they don't want us to know the our own history. I was talking to a guy today from the Netherlands, and he was in the army, and it was interesting his take on life. He says that people shouldn't know everything. And I said, well, that's the problem with the world today is that they're suppressing the knowledge and there's so much ignorance. That's what's fueling all this. Like, there's this chic to suicide. And he said, yeah, he goes, there are too many people in the world and there should be less people. I said, well, if that's the case, why don't you just kill yourself? He goes, well, I'm too much of a coward. I don't have the bravery to kill myself.
jeez,
I'm
that's
like,
not a very
well,
good outlook.
I said, there's enough space on this earth where everybody could fit into Texas and have an acre of land, grow their own food and survive. Like you don't even need, like you said, to be eating meat if they weren't spraying the skies with all this aluminum and all this stuff to make you gay and pussify you. We could all be living good lives, but there's a cult that exists, this death cult, that is using psyops to put into people's brains that they're useless eaters. So getting back to your answer about the CIA, absolutely true. What I learned while I was there was they would give us tests to see what we were good at. If we were sharpshooters, if we were electricians, if we were plumbers, if we were chemistry people. It turns out that, unbeknownst to me, my gift was art. So they were noticing, oh, this guy's good with art. We're going to put him into the propaganda program.
Propaganda guy.
Yeah. So I was the guy that they would make me do the t-shirts and the banners for the Army Navy games or anything that, and so then they put me into naval intelligence. So that's when I started learning how the mind works and how you can manipulate people's thought process. But I was so young. I was 18, 19 years old. So I was like, all right, this is what I got to do. But then I started realizing that the people that were leading me, it's toxic leadership, man. They're psychopaths there. So I was being trained by psychopaths. And that was around 1992 when they did the United Nations Agenda 21, Agenda
Yep.
2030. So what it turns out that the UN works with the military industrial complex, which works for the central bankers. The CIA
Yep.
works for the central bankers. See, people don't understand how this works. It's all
Yep.
for central bankers, like Smedley Butler said in his book,
Yep.
War is a
War's a
Racket.
racket.
So as soon as I found out, holy cow, I'm being trained to be a killer, but not just with the gun.
Yep.
Yeah, I get it. And the guy that I was talking to today, I was having this conversation with him. He's like, "Oh yeah, but it's fun to kill, like because like there's and I get it. There's some people who are psychopaths, and there is when you're dealing with guns and you're like, yeah, I get it. There's a thrill in that, and I get it. You're killing a lot of people with those, and some people are into that. But they had me on like a whole nother level, the
Yep.
psychological level of getting people like this guy to believe that it's cool to depopulate the planet because you got
Yep.
to lie to people and tell them that there's global warming, that, all this other stuff. It's all lies. And so, man, they've managed to brainwash our this new generation with being suicidal. And that's part of what my show is to kind of smack people into reality and say, hey, listen, man, I'm living proof that the CIA wanted to use me. Everybody thinks I'm CIA anyway, so it doesn't matter. But I've also, when I was touring with the modern art music movement, I remember touring with members of Boston and the Doobie Brothers. And I met the guy named Skunk Baxter. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
Mm.
But Skunk Baxter, when I met him, he's from the Doobie Brothers and Steely Dan. He goes, "Hey man, how you doing?" He goes, "I looked you up. You're CIA, aren't you?" I said, "No. Why would you say that?" He goes, "I'm CIA." I go, "Really?" I go, "Dude, you're a total rock star." He goes, "Yeah, yeah. The CIA uses rock bands and artists, like you said, to influence the
Yep.
culture. It's a culture war. People don't understand. The new war isn't what do they call it?
It's
There's
not
a
like a
kinetic
real war.
Kinetic, yeah.
Yeah.
Kinetic war is when you're like shooting people and stuff like that. Okay.
Yeah.
No, the new war, this is like sixth generation warfare. We've now passed the fifth generation warfare. We're into sixth generation warfare.
Now it's
This is
all in here.
the transhumanism, where they now have the 5G and the Starlink, and with the bioweapons disguised as vaccines, they've entered like nanotech in you with the robots and stuff. And even if you didn't take the bioweapons, they're spraying it in the skies through the geoengineering and the chemtrails. It's going into your food. So even if you're a vegan, the vegetables that you eat have nanoparticles in them. And
Oh yeah.
they've done autopsies on people. 11% of your brain has nanotech in it, and a certain percentage of your heart has nanotech. So they can actually do what they did in Rwanda. They can press a button and they can get you to kill whoever it is in the room with you, and you don't have control over yourself because now you're like a computer program, and if it says to kill, then you kill. That's what
Yeah.
sleeper cells, you know? And so that's where we're at now, and it's real. But what's I've spoken to, I just had an interview with Dr. Michael Schur, who is CIA, and he told me, he says, Vic, not everybody in CIA is a bad person. What happens is, like me, when I got in there, I went in there to be a doctor. I wanted to heal people. And so they were like, yeah, 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 we get it. We're going to send you through the medical program. But before we teach you how to save people's lives, we got to teach you how to kill. So that's what happens is you got some CIA, some FBI that are good people, but they don't realize, holy shit, man, we're working for
There's
evil, you know?
Yeah, they're still a part of control, a control system that's in place. It's funny you said that a cult, you would assume that it was a satanic or devilish type thing because that's that's one of the obvious propagandas that we're able to see. I also, and most people, if you ask them what the occult is, they're all, ooh, something satanic. The society has groomed us, has brainwashed us to think that because they don't want us looking into the occult and finding out that it's just hidden information that the powers that be have been hiding from us to keep us down. You know, we used to breathe ether and shit and live off of that. Like we've lost all these abilities because they've brainwashed us over the years. And the funny stuff with music is a lot of people don't know Jim Morrison of the Doors. The Doors was they're all army brats. Jim Morrison's dad was the captain of the ship that did the what was it, the Gulf of Tonkin?
Oh,
Gulf of
okay.
Tonkin. He was the ship captain that called in the false flag that started Vietnam. uh, Jim Morrison, all those crappy bands that came out, they're all CIA bands. They were made. They took their family members. Hey, if we're gonna make someone famous, might as well be someone in the family. We'll be able to control them. They made these guys famous, and they gave them this hippie anti-war message during a time when the anti-war message was being pushed by conservatives. And so they shoved all these dirty, stinky hippies and we're like, and made them all, oh, no war, to alienate the conservative anti-war movement during Vietnam. And people don't even know this shit. In Laurel Canyon in LA, it was one road. Everyone, all the CIA bands lived there. There's a recording studio up there. It's the same recording studio where they filmed the moon landing. It's crazy stuff that no one even knows. Everyone, oh, the Doors is just a band that just started and they organically, and it's like, no, they were legit. The Doors, the Byrds, the Beach Boys, all these bands were invented. These people weren't the greatest musicians. If you go look at their early stuff, they're garbage musicians. I mean, most bands are garbage musicians in the beginning, but literally, like, you can tell that they just put a bunch of kids in the room and were like, okay, play music, and the kids are all okay, do 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 do. Like, it's like, not, I hate to bash a whole generation of music, but it was pretty bad. And once you know, oh, these are CIA bands, and you're like, that's why they're bad, because they're being forced to do music. They're not doing it organically. But yeah, Jim Morrison's dad was a part of one of the biggest false flags that caused the death of billions of people. Like, people don't even know the Khmer Rouge that happened after Vietnam. Billions, like, so many people were killed just because of that. And that's a direct result of something we did, not we, our government did back in the day. So yeah, the CIA, holy crap. And then Esalen Institute in California, during the 70s and 80s and 60s, that's where the CIA was hanging out with the KGB, and they were hanging out with all the new age philosophers and all the Jordan Petersons of the time. They're all hanging out there doing LSD, getting naked with girls in hot springs, and they were getting co-opted and they were getting controlled. And that happened in all this stuff happened in California. It's really crazy. And the impacts of the ripples that those guys made back in the day at the Esalen Institute, that's why we have Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro and, like, all these guys controlling the minds of the entire world, honestly. And, Elon Musk, these CIA planted people, they're controlling the minds of billions of people. And everyone just, no, Joe Rogan's cool. He's got a rad podcast. But like the carnivore diet thing, like, that wasn't even a thing a couple years ago. And now everyone's doing it. And guess what? Meat and dairy has been going down. The industry has been tanking in the last 10 years. If you're a marketer for meat and dairy, what do you do to get people to eat more meat? Pay a bunch of influencers to go out there and tell everyone to only eat meat. And guess what? They convinced billions of people to do that, even though it is horrendously bad for your health, the environment, economics, economically insane to do that. And everyone bought it hook, line, and sinker, and everyone thinks it's science, and people are dying from it. It's a really bad idea, but everyone has accepted it because Joe Rogan had a guy on his podcast that when Dr. Baker went on Joe Rogan's podcast and said he only eats meat, everybody was like, "What? Dude, you're gonna die." And now it's the coolest thing in the world is to be carnivore right now. And
Man, you
it's
know what?
direct marketing. It's CIA marketing propaganda. Like, make the people weaker, get them in the hospital. Like, they make money from all of this stuff. They make money selling you the fucking product. They make money off of subsidies. They make money off of you going to the doctor or you being in the hospital the last 20 years of your life, where your life savings goes towards to keeping you alive in a hospital bed. Like, that doesn't sound cool, but it's cool for the powers that be. They make so much money off that. So they want us consuming the wrong thing. And like, what a creepy death cult, where you got to kill and eat several animals a day. When you really look into it spiritually, it's one of the worst things it's a holocaust that is happening right before our eyes, and no one talks about it.
Wow, one of the coolest parts of this show is that it's unrehearsed, it's raw, it's real. Like, you and I didn't plan on having this conversation. I didn't know you were going to take us down this rabbit hole when you asked me that question. I can tell you this. I've just recently realized that what you said about the music industry during the Vietnam War is now happening with the
Again,
CIA in the alternative news media. Just like you said with Joe Rogan, who went on camera and said, "Hey, listen, CIA, if you're out there, I'll lie to my mother, hire me." And then he got like $100 million contract with I don't know what. But there's footage out there. You could find it, people.
oh
Do your
yeah, it's
research.
all out there.
So check this out, man. This is super weird. I just did a show with Win Young, who stumbled upon the whole Sandy Hook treason thing. And
Hmm.
see, this is when we're dealing with the occult, the people who are this death cult, they're not very creative. They don't have what us artists have, which is we don't think like regular people. We are what's called light workers. We think tangentially, we think fractally, we don't see life in a straight line. At least I don't. As an artist, I see it like this because I know that one thing leads to another, but it's not a straight line. That's how they think. But they forget that there's always a wrench thrown into the works. Well, it turns out that being the reason I got into this alternative news media, which was not my idea. I was supposed to be living in China, working on the film series Crackhead Jesus the movie, working on sculptures with masters in China. I had a 10-year visa to live and work there. So like this was not in my plan. But because I was getting death threats because I was exposing the COVID psyop, because I was asked to be a part of it by the Huayping Wang army, I was supposed to travel around the world being the Fauci, saying, yeah, take your vaccines, the bioweapons disguised as vaccines, they're safe and effective, wear your face masks 6 feet apart. I was going to be that guy. And I was going to be rich and famous. They already had it all set up. But as soon as I found out that it was a psyop, I said, I don't want any part of it. That's when they said, okay, well, if you don't do it, we'll get somebody else, but you're dead. So then they started giving me death threats. So that's when I started doing this show because I wanted people to know I'm not suicidal. Anyway, fast forward. I start going on different shows like SGT Report, Stu Peters, Jim Fetzer, Gareth Ike. I'm doing all these different shows. I'm the new kid on the block. Everybody's like, oh my God, this guy must be CIA. Somebody's like his handler getting him all these shows and everything. It turns out though that there's a guy named Jim Fetzer who turns out to be born in that area that you're speaking about, the Laurel Canyon
Laurel
area, that
Canyon.
California area and stuff. It turns out he's COINTELPRO. but he's an old timer. He's the guy who wrote Nobody Died at Sandy Hook, which it turns out was a total false flag created to suppress the First Amendment, journalism, because anybody who tries to report on what really happened at Sandy Hook is
Alex
afraid of
Jones.
doing it because of Alex Jones with the
Yeah.
1.5 billion. And also Jim Fetzer got sued for half a million. He owes a lot more than that now with interest.
Yeah.
Anyway, that silenced all the fake news journalists who were too afraid to actually go down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
But it didn't silence me because I've already lost everything. I've lost my family, I've lost my friends, I've I've lost all the money and everything, so I got nothing to lose. So
Yeah.
I'm going down that rabbit hole, you know? And then I find out that what happens is, just like you were saying with the doors and everything, they use these people, they give them these platforms like Joe Rogan goes skyrocketing to the top, and Jim
Yep.
Fetzer is able to make a phone call to Stu Peters after I appeared on Stu Peters' show and broke the news about the Sandy Hook treason of which Alex Jones and Jim Fetzer are being investigated for. He calls Stu Peters and says, "Hey, listen, you need to do something about that." So within 48 hours of the interview that I did about me being censored on Mike Adams' show, and he owns Brighteon, which is supposed to be free speech, I had a guest on, Monica Schaefer, who went to jail in Germany for exposing the Holocaust hoax. That gets censored. So how weird is that? I go on Stu Peters, he censors the show that I did about getting censored on Brighteon after getting a phone call from Jim Fetzer. And Jim Fetzer goes on and brags about this, by the way. He's also bragging that he's connected to Mike Adams. So now I'm like, holy cow, I'm starting to put the pieces together. Mike Adams with Alex Jones. Stu Peters also blew up after he went on Alex Jones' show and had that confrontation about the Jews. So you'll notice Alex Jones never talks about the Jews. It's
Does not
always
talk about
the
Jews. Yeah.
bombs, it's always the globalists, it's always the Zionists, it's always the deep state, but it's never the Jews. Then you
I've
got,
always been suspicious of Mike Adams.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think that the Sandy Hook thing was almost it almost was the best evidence that we have for Alex Jones being a COINTELPRO because he went along with that whole thing. And if he was really a truther, he would have
Yeah,
dealt with that thing all completely different, in my opinion.
totally. So
But
it turned out,
he was the fall guy, and that's
yes,
how it's like such a good example, Alex, to teach other people of what COINTELPROs are. They're someone who hang out, they'll get your trust by telling you a bunch of shit that you like, and then every once in a while they come in and they do something super fucked up that's completely something to control us, something to brainwash us, and everyone will be like, but that's Alex Jones, that's legit. And it's like, no, you can't. While you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater, you also have to really be careful of these guys because you can't fall in love with them because they're going to deceive you. They're literally invented and they've been given the platform to deceive you eventually at some point. Because people are so gullible. They're like, oh, but Alex did this. And it's like, so fucking what? Now he's doing this, and this is disinfo. You can't ignore that just because someone did a bunch of stuff you like. I see people say it all the time. Oh, that sucks about that, but I like his content. And it's like the content you have to be, you have to have discernment to see what exactly is bullshit or not. You can't just buy all of it just because you like the guy. But Alex definitely, he's a funny dude. Like, he's a hilarious dude. Off his show, he's one of the funniest guys in the world, honestly. If you watch interviews with Alex Jones or see him on people's shows, he's hilarious. And that's because they need him to be hilarious because he's better. That's how you can get that's how you can get convinced that someone's cool is by them being funny. Like, humor is very powerful. Charisma intoxicates. So, yeah,
man,
it's
Jeffrey, along those lines, getting back to your CIA and how I was being groomed to be part of exactly what you just described. One of the creepiest meetings I was ever part of was when I was 19 years old at Annapolis, Maryland, in the office of Admiral Virgil Hill, who was like super top ranking. You don't meet this guy
yeah.
unless there's something serious going on. I'm sitting there in his office, and it's like this huge office, fancy couches and everything. and there's all these like guys in suits with white hair, old white dudes. Nothing against white people. I love white people. But these were like Freemason looking dudes, you know?
Yeah.
And they're all sitting in this office, and I'm there 19 years old in my officer's uniform. And they're like, listen, we're getting a lot of heat from this Naval Academy rape situation. This was before the internet. This was in 1989, 1990. It was all over the Washington Post, the New York Times. It was making international headlines because they started putting women into the military. And of course, you're going
Yeah.
to have a bunch of guys that are
Obviously.
18, 19 wanting to kill, and then you see some hot chicks there. Uh, Girls are going to be
Still a
getting,
problem now. Very
yeah,
much
yeah.
still a problem now.
Yeah, so I witnessed the sexual assault of a female midshipman officer while I was there. And I wasn't the only one because she was raped in front of a lot of people. And then people were cheering it on. It was like a big, it was like a party there, you know? The girl was crying, she was handcuffed to a urinal and everything. It was pretty disgusting. And these were the leaders. These were the guys that I was supposed to take off, like instruction from. If they told me to kill somebody, I was supposed to kill somebody. Meanwhile, I'm watching them rape one of my fellow sisters in arms,
Officers. Yeah.
you know? So when it came time to tell the truth, they sent investigators in from DC, and it turns out, man, I was the only guy who dared to speak out and say, yeah, she's
Okay.
right. What she's saying actually happened because
Yeah.
she said what happened to her, and everybody else lied about it. Everybody was like, no, that's not true. That's not true. But when they came to me, I said, yeah, that's true. So anyway, in the middle of the night, I get a visit from some people. I couldn't tell who it was because they put a mag flashlight in my face. So all I saw was like light. But I felt the gun that was on my head, and I felt the knife that was on my throat. And they said, listen, if you say anything, we're going to kill you. And they told me how they were going to kill me by throwing me overboard on an aircraft carrier or pushing me into the engine of a fighter jet. And I would be swept overboard, and my family would receive a folded flag in a wooden box, and they would be told that I died honorably in the line of duty.
Yeah.
So when I was with Admiral Virgil Hill, he's like, "Hey, listen, are you sure you saw that? Because you're the only one who's corroborating with her story." I said, "Yeah, that's what I saw. That's what happened." He says, "Well, listen, maybe you didn't see it that way, but we see you as a very potential candidate. We can actually make you the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, or we could make you congressman, senator, or who knows, maybe the first Hispanic American president of the United States of America. How would you like that? But we have to squash this story because it's getting too big." So what they wanted me to do was compromise my integrity. Now, see, this is what happens though. The moment that you do that, the moment that you say the lie and you move into that lie, that's the moment they own you. So they would have owned me from the age of 19. I would have compromised my integrity. And if I was willing to do that, the next thing that they do is they bring you into a party where they say, hey, listen, here's a 9-year-old, go ahead and have sex with her. They're filming it. Next thing you know, they have footage of you having sex with a 9-year-old. The next
They're
thing you know, they're
compromised.
like,
Yeah.
okay, kill her. You know what I'm saying? And so as you move up the ladder, you have to do things so that they can compromise you. That's the CIA. That's what we're being led by. And so what I was told, because I wouldn't
Psychos.
do that, yeah, was I was told to go into hiding. So I said, listen, I can't stay here because they're trying to kill me. So they gave me an honorable discharge. And then I remember a CIA guy came and talked to me and my father. He goes, listen, we hear your son's going to be writing a book. He's going on television. He's telling his story. We can't tell him what to do, but we highly recommend that, he kind of keep quiet and go into hiding. So that's what I did, man. And that's how this game works. And that's what people don't realize is we're being led by psychopaths who are more interested in fame, fortune, power, and glory than telling the truth. And see, now what's interesting is now I'm finding that out again with Jim Fetzer because it turns out if you're familiar with Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals, you always accuse your enemy of what it is that you're doing. So he's claiming that I am notoriously known as the Angel of Death, a character assassin in the industry. And that's why I've risen so quickly in the alternative news media, because now I'm exposing Alex Jones and Stu Peters and Mike
The
Adams and Jim.
muckraker.
Yeah, yeah, I'm the muckraker. So he's saying that I'm working for Sandy Hook Promise, making millions of dollars every month, right? So I contact the people from Sandy Hook Promise, the CEO and everything of Sandy Hook Promise, and I say, hey, listen, man, you guys might want to like do something about this because he's making it seem like you're colluding with me. And it's a charity that people pay because they feel that, the parents of these dead school children, I don't know, deserve pity or money or whatever. All I know is the whole thing is like stinking to high heaven. Their silence is deafening. All I'm saying is what's it's showing is that Jim Fetzer is actually colluding with Sandy Hook Promise to keep people from talking about Sandy Hook because it leads all the way up to Obama. And this was before the Smith-Mundt Act was repealed. So it shows you how they were using the Sandy Hook false flag to silence journalism and to take away the Second Amendment right to protect yourself. So this is now back in the news. But man, it's just incredible how this stuff ends up happening and how over time the truth always prevails, man.
Yep. Yep. Uh, the psyop is pretty deep because they convince everyone to accept it, and people don't like changing, so they get stuck in these bad positions. Like the powers that be, they know they're dark hermeticists. They understand natural law. They understand all these laws, and they are against us. Uh-oh.
Jeff, can you
Yeah.
yeah,
Can you hear me still?
we can hear you, but we can't see you.
Okay. Yeah, my camera went
Picture
away.
there.
Hold on
That's
one
pretty
second.
cool. That's a cool shot. So when you say they're dark hermeticists, can you explain that for the audience?
They understand natural law enough to use it against us. Like you're talking about, we were talking about what the psyop in or the false flags that were happening in the 60s and 70s being done again now. That's the hermetic principle of rhythm. They do these things over and over again because they know that that's how it works the best, and they use, they've had generations and bazillions of dollars to get ahead of us knowledge wise, and to keep us in this state where we only have enough information to keep ourselves enslaved, basically. It's pretty wild how much they control us, and how much, once you start getting on the path of unlearning all this stuff and making yourself ungovernable and unslaving yourself, you start realizing, man, like everything, they had a hand in everything that we know, and we know everything that we know is for us to think big government is great, and having these leaders is great, and being a slave is awesome. And it's just shocking to see, to realize it, coming to the conclusion that just like we're all straight up slaves, and we don't know everything about our environment, and we don't know the full capabilities of our brains, and we don't know all this stuff because it's been kept from us.
Hey, by the way, can't see you on the screen. So
Yeah, I don't know.
is I'm gonna have you try to see if you can get yourself back on the screen. In the meantime, I'm gonna play for the audience the video of this band called Can and that song that I was telling you about, Vitamin C. So let's see if we can get you back on. And while we're getting you back on, I'm gonna share screen with the audience and have people check out this super cool song that I tried playing for you earlier. Check this out, people. This is called Can. It's Vitamin C. This is footage from 1972. Let's start again.
air and rain and money all on. Leaving just and flows. I stay at the corner. She is a living under tune.
Okay, so let's see if it plays.
Christmas, oh, holy, oh, she ain't stepping on a creek. Up the through floors, I stay at the corner. She is a living in another tune.
Holy cow, let me tell you, that song, it's hard to believe that that was produced in the late 1960s. The drumming in that is phenomenal. I was literally just turned on to that last week by a gentleman from Russia who had asked me if I'd ever heard that. Apparently, he really couldn't hear it though, which
Yeah, the
sucks.
sound was a little weird. It looked cool. The bass player looked like he was pretty rad.
Oh man, that sucks. So you really couldn't hear
We'll
it, huh?
watch it
That
after. Yeah.
oh man, I'm sorry, but well, anyway,
It
if you
sounded kind of almost a little Eastern, or that might have
yeah,
just been the bad sound I was getting.
yeah. So that's because I'm in the Caucasus Mountains. I'm in the middle of nowhere, so my reception internet is not that good. But at least now you guys know it's called Can Vitamin C. I highly suggest that you check that out if you're watching or listening to this show. It's something that it's interesting how music communicates through the generations. Jeffrey, you being part of a band, how do you feel that music fits into the frequency of what we're living through right now, this apocalypse, this great awakening?
Um, Unfortunately, I mean, I feel like the 90s was probably the last time we had like authentic, genuine music. I feel like anything in the mainstream now is basically marketing just to get people to be materialists, like satanic materialists. And it's there's so much good music in the world. That's why you mentioned that earlier, and it's like it's such a shame that the new generations are just exposed to this top 40 marketing garbage that is warping the brains of this generation, because everyone thinks materialism is the coolest thing. Everyone thinks that this is just some race to get a bunch of toys, and that you don't need to worry about the people around you, that, like this I'm gonna steal your girlfriend mentality of music that is, it's weird because it almost started with like hip hop, but then like I've heard some modern country these days, and the lyrical content is exactly the same. Like it's gone into like there was a very I think it was 1996. There was a the Zionists that own all the record companies got Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg and basically set off to destroy that culture. And they basically, mission accomplished, did it simply through a couple groups. And I think they saw how well that worked, and they started spreading it to the other genres of music. And just teaching people garbage, just to be consumers, just to not care about anyone but yourself, to be a de facto Satanist, basically, a practicing Satanist. Yeah, you aren't worshiping the devil, but you're acting like you worship the devil. You don't care that there's karma, and that a karmic inventory fills and bad things start happening to the world and you. People think, oh, there's no such thing as karma because I don't get smacked in the face immediately when I do something wrong. But that's not how karma works. Karma affects the world around you as much as it eventually affects you. So if you keep putting shit into the world, eventually that shit's going to pile onto you and you're going to be screwed. It's not something that just comes up and slaps you in the face. So I don't know how I got on that tangent, but
Well, through art and through music.
oh yeah.
That you and
So
I,
yeah, that's right. The art, how art is used to change. I mean, I know by my experience and what I saw being in a band at a crucial time, I know how much our influence changed the way kids dress to this day. So I know just by my little anecdote of being in one band, how much we affected the culture. So I could imagine how much the culture is being affected by people that set out to change people's minds. Because like the band I was in, we didn't like, oh, we want to make every kid dress like this. Like it wasn't our intention to go out and mess with people, But the powers that be actually have the intention to mess with people. So you can imagine how much they've messed with us, having complete control, having unlimited funds, having unlimited, like I was saying earlier, they're ahead of us, very far ahead of us. They're 100 steps ahead of us because they've had all the time and money to find all the information and to hide that information from us, basically neutering us as humans. We're not able to progress. We're not able to, be truly pacifists. We still, that might be why we're here still, is because we haven't evolved enough. We haven't stopped killing animals. We haven't stopped killing ourselves and other humans. It might be why we've been separated from other places, but I don't really want to dive too far deep in that rabbit hole. But yeah, music, people, I mean, there's potential for music being more popular than any other media form, in my opinion. People listen to songs a billion times. They don't watch podcasts a billion times, you know. So there's more. You got to be a little bit sneakier in order to brainwash people with music, but the power is there, and it has been used against us, and it is being used against us. You know, I know just by seeing what my son's listening to and the lyrical content of that stuff. And I talk to him about it. I'm like, you know, because it's not the right way of doing things, but when you hear it all day. And the other thing, you wonder why every car has a radio in it. When you're sitting in traffic, if you're not listening to something, you start thinking about how fucked up everything is. And you start like, hey, you know, I want to go out and change the world, you know, but if you're listening to some dumb music, you totally don't think that way. At least I think like if I'm in a car and the radio's not on, I just start going deep. It's like meditation almost. But they don't want us meditating. They don't want us deeply thinking or critically thinking. So they put a little button in your car that you press that plays you dumb music, you know, just like the fine art movement that came out with, you know, no offense to Andy Warhol, but like he kind of, you know, his art was kind of pointless. Like it doesn't teach or, I mean, sure, it could influence because of the art, because it's cool, but like it's not influencing people to change the world. And so that's the top 40 radio we're being played right now in our cars to keep us from overthrowing the government. You know, they just want us distracted by bullshit. And they want us thinking that bullshit is the most important shit in the world. And so, yeah, music is a very powerful tool, just like the internet, just like AI, can be used for good, can be used for very bad at the same time if the people aren't using it for good.